Hello my internet friends. So today we're finally reviewing the Blackmagic 6K full frame camera, which I'm actually using to film this review. It took a while for me to go through all the testing, which I did extensive amounts of because I didn't want to do just one of those rushed fanboy-like reviews that, oh, this is a new camera, it's great, and I just release it just for the sake of the clicks. You might want to go back and review some of the videos that I've done before with this camera, comparing it to the Sony camera, and I also made some videos comparing the Blackmagic 6K full frame to some of the Panasonic cameras, which I will release eventually at some point, or I may not. It doesn't really impact the conclusions of this review, but I'm just saying that I have done an extensive amount of testing. If you have come here for the validation of your purchase, unfortunately you might not find any, because I will be basing purely on the facts and the results that I've done from my testing. I also understand there will be a lot of brand affiliation, association. Blackmagic is probably, out of all the cameras that I've used, one of the most religiously cult-like following group of people. If you are one of those people, you might be just wasting your time because you are not gonna find any mercy. And if the camera is shit in some areas, I will disclose that as it is. I don't really care. The Blackmagic didn't send me the camera. I have no obligations whatsoever. I literally just tested for myself because the videos that I release with all the testing and so on, they are not for the clicks or for the growth of the channel. Above all else, they're for me because I actually go back and compare it to my other cameras. I'm curious like that, I suppose. I used to do that for many years. It's only the last 2 years that I've been uploading this to YouTube. Just touching back on the testing methodology, I used the Nikon 35mm f2.5. The E lens is one of the cheapest 35mm manual everything kind of lenses that you can find on the market. I really like them. Nikon always has produced very natural, neutral looking like skin tones, and I have 2 of them, so I use those interchangeably or together side by side with the other cameras that I've been testing against. And with that out of the way, let's get to the points that make this camera great. First and most important in my list anyway, although the list is not really based on the importance, but coincidentally, this is the first thing that came to my mind, and it is, in fact, the most important point for me, is the ability to shoot RAW internally, which for me, it really translates to 3 points, breaking that down. 1, flexibility. Really, it's just a white balance, because if you mess up the exposure on RAW, guess what? You will also have maybe not as bad of a degradation of the image, but it will be still significant degradation of image if you underexpose or overexpose the footage compared to the 10-bit, let's say. 2, much lighter overall package. When you need to attach external monitors, and especially when attaching the batteries that go on the back of those external monitors, the whole setup becomes extremely cumbersome and heavy. And for me, lightness and mobility is really 2 very important points. So that's why RAW recording comes so much on top, because of that. Essentially, I'm able to carry that around, and I'm able to turn the camera on and work immediately, not needing to rig anything up. I run the camera completely unrigged, naked if you will, as much as I can. And I even bought the XQD card. Where is it? There you go. It's just a 512 gig Angelbird XQD card. Funny enough, I'm recording actually to an SSD because when I'm in the studio, it's easier to record to an SSD. But again, when I travel, I need the lightness. And lastly, number 3 is the advanced coloring options. Because you're capturing so much more data compared to, say, 10-bit, conventional 10-bit, you have actually in post a lot more leeway in terms of colors. And so if you're doing a bit more advanced grading, internal RAW or just RAW in general is definitely the way to go. Number 2 is image quality. Like I said before, you have a lot more data to play with, and that results basically in a lot less degradation when it comes to actual color shifting. So if you're shifting certain colors to one side or the other, because there is so much more data, 12-bit RAW is actually 4 times more the tonality values compared to 10-bit. You actually have a lot more data at your disposal, and at the same time it increases the accuracy of your final grade. Number 3 is the workflow. I really enjoy Blackmagic workflow. I have not worked with any other bigger RAW, like Red RAW or Alexa RAW cameras that I would be able to compare them to. But in terms of like actual workflow compared to other 10-bit cameras, the Blackmagic is really, really convenient. And at the same time, it plays fantastic. It plays really well on pretty much any machine you like. Number 4 on the list is gyros. I really need to attach a big asterisk for this because currently the gyros, they just don't work as well as they did on my Pocket 4K and Pocket 6K cameras. On those cameras, it was locked on almost gimbal-like, pretty much in any scenario. At the moment, Blackmagic has issues, and I have contacted them, and their support advised me that the developers are in the stages of fixing it. There has been a release of the new Blackmagic Studio since then. I am yet to test it. For now, it looks like it could be a marginal improvement in gyro performance, but it also could be a placebo effect. I don't know, I'll need to do more testing. But when they do work, they're fantastic. They're actually really, really cool and pretty much eliminates the need to carry a gimbal with you. Number 5 is color science. If I just follow the CST workflow of each brand, I would say Blackmagic on top, Panasonic second, closely together with Fuji, to be honest. Other cameras fall much further down the line. What it means that if I shoot, for example, with Blackmagic and the Sony, I need to try and work the colors of Sony much harder to match the Blackmagic, because for my personal eye and my taste of aesthetics, Blackmagic produces much more pleasing colors straight out the box. Number 6 is the menus. They are fantastic. They're some of the best menus I've used in my life. Probably, okay, I'll say they are the best menus of any manufacturer that you could choose from, with, again, a slight asterisk. They are missing some items, but I don't want to jump ahead with the negatives yet. So anyway, for now, the menus are fantastic. They're great. They're very intuitive, and they're very easy to navigate for even people who never use the Blackmagic camera. You can jump in, use it, and it is addictive, because if you go to any other manufacturer and they are not as quite good, it can be challenging. But I personally got myself into a very good habit of being patient and spending maybe half an hour to 1 hour to really learn the camera menus of other manufacturers, and actually life is not that hard afterwards. Number 7 is the absolutely amazing, bright, and finally tilting screen. I know tilting screen has been released with the Blackmagic 6K Pro, I think Pocket 6K Pro, yes, a while ago, but this one is the first one that I've been using, and it's amazing. It's absolutely fantastic. Actually, it's saved my ass a few times where I almost messed things up, but because it's so bright and detailed, I was able to see in the bokeh, or you know, in the background, that some things are not right with my lens, and then adjusted them right there, which otherwise, if I was on a small, tiny, you know, mirrorless type of screen, I would have never seen this. There is one caveat with that screen being so bright. You really need to monitor your video exposure monitoring tools, because actually if the brightness is a little bit too high and you purely rely on your eye, you are potentially gonna mess up the exposure. And I even done it myself a few times, so there you go. Number 8 is SSD recording. I mentioned already that I am recording this into an SSD, but it is very convenient for, I didn't realize until today, my actually CFast Express card reader that I bought on Amazon failed, and I would be left stranded without any way of recording, because the camera only has internally CFast Express recording, but because it has also the USB Type-C recording externally, I was able to use it. I can just turn it on, put the SSD in, do the recording, whatever I'm recording, done it, turn it off, pull the SSD out, put it in my laptop, and immediately edit it. Number 9 is the full HDMI, although I don't know if I should be giving credit for this at this day and age, but the Sony ZV-1, which has the same sensor as the FX3 and A7S3 and even FS6, well, that little camera came out with the micro HDMI, and I thought that's an absolute blasphemy in this day and age. So it's a tiny one, but it's a win for Blackmagic. Number 10 is sound recording options. I really like that it has 2 mini XLR jacks that I could be using for whenever I'm out and about and maybe I need it in a pinch. Although I would never by now use a 24-bit recording. I use exclusively 32-bit recorder. It would be amazing if it could both do raw video and raw sound. That would be absolutely mind-blowing. But in a pinch, you can use Blackmagic to record, and the actual microphones on the camera are really decent. So if you need some environment recordings, although the fan inside might overcome, if it's quiet enough, the sounds that coming into those mics. But if you are in a loud environment and you monitor your levels, you can actually get by recording a stereo sound on these two. What I do though is I record one mic, doesn't matter left or right, at -6 dB and the other one at +6 dB. So I have really wide dynamic range of, I don't know, whatever happens if I'm recording in a field, at least I can capture sound at very, very far extremes, so in between. Number 11 is false color. I wish all the cameras would have that, but unfortunately they don't, and it's one of the most valuable tools, video monitoring, exposure monitoring tools that you can have in the camera is the false color. Once you get used to it, there's no way back. And lastly, number 12 is you get a free version of DaVinci Resolve Studio, which for me is worth it just for the noise reduction. I use that all the time and it works absolutely fantastic. The good thing is if you buy one Blackmagic camera, you have the Studio perpetual license forever for yourself. And when you buy subsequent cameras in the future, like I just did, you can resell the key to whoever to offset the cost of the cameras. So I actually managed to sell my one for about £150. Not too bad. Obviously, you know, the brand new version, retail version of the software is a lot more expensive, but every little helps. Right, so at this point you may think that, oh, that's a pretty extensive list and must be a very good camera. Well, I have a surprise for you. The next part of the video will be the negatives that I'll be speaking about the camera, and it's a lot longer than the list I've just discussed. So let's get to it, and the number one thing is poor ergonomics. I know some of the people will argue that, oh, the menus are amazing, what is there to complain about? Well, that's just the one part. The second part is the actual buttons. The camera has really one of the worst feeling and also ergonomically laid out buttons of all the cameras I've ever used. And that is for three really reasons. Number one, they all, not all of them, but most of them are the same shape, like identical shape. So operating the camera in dark just by feel is pretty much impossible because so many of the buttons are identical and they feel identical and they look identical and so on. Number two is I would maybe forgive them looking all the same, but none of them are backlit. Panasonic S1H, I believe, and some of the older flagship Nikon and Canon cameras, they all had backlit buttons because, well, guess what? We work most of the time in darkness as professionals, especially in studio environments. So you do need that backlit button functionality. And I just don't understand why we still don't have those in Blackmagic. And number three is actually a very easy thing to fix in a firmware, which I don't know why they haven't done it by now, which is there is no programmable buttons. There is 3 buttons that you can choose the options for, but there is no such a thing as like press and hold to program for a button to do something else. I'll try to pick up my pace and go through the list maybe a little bit faster because I've been here for a long time discussing these things. So you might not see that because, you know, when you edit, everything is nicely cut and everything is going in a sequence and nice, and doesn't show that. For example, I take maybe 50 takes to say one phrase because I get some weird Tourette-like thing where I cannot deliver a line that I was having in my head. But as soon as I spit it out, it just goes like this. Anyway, number 2 is the weird, crappy looking, feeling like awkward grommets that we have on the side of the camera next to the I/O. Everyone pretty much removes those as soon as the camera arrives because they are just not usable at all, and they don't look like they protect against anything anyway. They're really not that great. I don't understand why they couldn't make the camera a little bit more boxy and put the doors in like everybody else, so you could actually take it outside and, you know, again, it's based on a pocket design. Why not to make it more mobile and carryable by doing such a simple thing like making the I/O with a door and a latch? It literally could be just one gigantic door with a rubber gasket and that's it. We don't need 4 different grommets to, it's just so badly designed. This is really, I don't know why they didn't change it by now. Number 3 is the weight. There's not much to discuss about it. It's just a heavy camera, that's all. And I'm actually forced to pick lighter lenses just because of it. Ideally, I would like it to be lighter, but it is what it is. Number 4, there is no real nice horizon meter. You have a little crosshairs that indicate I believe actually they indicate more like how your gyros behave, because when it's blue, I think you are within the range of gyro stabilization, and when it's not blue, it's out of that range. And they do like misalign to show you that they are, that the camera is not horizontally straight, but they're so tiny. I don't understand why they didn't do just a nice long horizon thing, again, with a programmable button that you engage when you want the camera to be perfectly level. I cannot count how many times I have misaligned horizon just because I didn't have a nice level. And it's really, really annoying when you jump on a much cheaper, much lighter hybrid camera and they have a perfectly usable level. And then in post, you have to crop the image because ultimately when you're rotating it, it gets cropped. Number 5, no waveform. How in this supposed cinema video-like camera there is no waveforms? Yes, you have a tiny, teeny, tiny histogram, and yes, the false color is amazing, but you don't really have an overall scene luminance reading. Even a simple, actually, I could live without the waveform, but give me at least an overall luminance reading, like a meter, like a light meter reading that you normally see in DSLRs or the hybrid cameras, the one that just shows you where the scene is in terms of from the middle gray point, overall reading. Number 6, again, touching to video light metering side of things, there is no secondary zebras. All my Panasonic cameras have them at the moment, but Blackmagic don't. And they would be really, really useful because you could dial in just your, say, skin tones and your clipping points, and then you have perfectly exposed scene without needing even to touch the false color. Number 7 is poor build quality. It's maybe not as much of a quality checks type of problem, but as soon as you pick it up in your hands, and I had a friend yesterday who actually is a fairly recent photographer, and he's using Panasonic gear, and he touched it and he's like, oh, that just feels cheap, man. He's like, you paid $2.5 grand for this? Yeah, it is extremely cheap feeling. I know for a fact people would pay a lot more if they would give us a nice magnesium alloy body or aluminum or whatever you call it, but this just feels like some 90s gimmicky electronics. That's how I have to say it. It is what it is. The body truly feels awful. There is no way around it. I don't even know who could be a fan of it. If you are, you definitely should question your taste in life, because this is bad. And I know that firsthand because my original Pocket 6K actually dropped it for about, I don't know, knee height, and it cracked. Number 8 is noisy internal fan. I understand, yes, cinema cameras are historically noisy, but Red Komodo is not. And I would like to see the Blackmagic giving us at least an option to switch off the noisy fan, at least to even for a short burst recording, because there are situations for myself personally when I record sound in quiet environments, I actually cannot do that because the fan is just too loud. Number 9, no weather sealing whatsoever. I thought it was maybe, usable in a light rain or light mist situation, like Komodo cameras, at least as far as I know. But no, I contacted the Blackmagic and they advised me not to use it in rain or snow or anything, just because their ventilation system has been improved. In other words, it means it's more porous. So yeah, again, paying that amount of money, I said like before, I would much rather pay extra and have a camera that I can rely on in all types of weathers, and this one is definitely not it. Number 10 is no internal IBIS. Is pretty much not existent in there. A lot of people saying, oh, it's because of the shorter flange distance they cannot do it. Bullshit, because Panasonic L mount, again, same flange distance, 20 millimeters or so. Why they can do it and Blackmagic cannot do it? The only thing I can think of is maybe the stack that they have on top of it, the optical low pass filter and maybe the IR cut filter or something like that. Maybe those could contribute to a shortened flange distance in theory, but even Sony, Burano, I understand the camera prices are not comparable, but let's not dwell on things that are in the past and let's focus in the future. So I think we could really benefit from internal image stabilization in cinema cameras. Number 11 is no autofocus. Again, with times moving forward, even Sony has now autofocus in their cinema cameras, and even Red Komodo, which I keep comparing it to, has a phase detect autofocus system that actually continuously working to improve on. And even Panasonic, of all cameras that were so resistant to deliver a good autofocus, that were stuck with their contrast-based autofocus system, I think if that feature is going to be missing for a long time, it might be a problem again for Blackmagic. Personally, for myself, it's not a big deal, but I am just disclosing it again because some people will be looking at this that are maybe reliant on autofocus, like wedding cinematographers or people who do more action. This camera doesn't have any. Number 12 is no viewfinder, or at least no viewfinder out the box. It's an optional extra. It's quite expensive one too. I know some people were like, oh, it's a great viewfinder, you should be able to pay the money for it, but most of the hybrid mirrorless cameras include that in the body, so I would rather maybe have a low quality but still a viewfinder than needing to splash out extra money for something that should have been really included, in my opinion anyway. Number 13 is no SD card slot. There is more than enough space at the back to have the SD card slots, and I have a crap ton of SD cards, so it really kind of is annoying that they stripping down the extra resilience, if you will, from compared to previous cameras, because you would be able to have the CFast or CFast Express and SD and SSD recording, and now you're just having one option less. And the V90 cards are pretty fast, and to be honest, I was able to record the SD cards on my previous 6K camera, no problem. For short bursts, fair enough, but again, in a pinch, it was a really nice thing to have, and I wish they had it implemented in this latest camera. Number 14 is poor rolling shutter performance. It's one of the worst ones in the market. I don't know how I feel about it. To be honest, it shouldn't be even anymore considered as a poor rolling shutter performance. It should be either it does have a global shutter or it doesn't. And in this instance, it does not. And with the announcement of Sony A9 III and the global shutter, I really hope that one day Blackmagic will introduce it, because when you see the footage shot on global shutters such as Red Komodo, as soon as there is some kind of movement and it's a little bit faster movement, it's so apparent, and it's so much nicer to have a global shutter. So it's a thing that I would really wish that Blackmagic would have done it. And I'm sure people would have paid a lot more if you would have these features in. So why not to do them? Number 15 is poor ISO performance, or poor high ISO performance. I know their graph on the website says that, you know, native ISOs are 400 and 3200 is bullshit. In reality, the lowest ISO is 100, and the second base that it kicks in at is 1250, which is identical to the Pocket 4K and 6K cameras, and the performance is near identical too, which is very poor. For a full frame, that kind of ISO performance is really bad. Myself personally, I have mixed feelings about it, because on one hand, you don't want these kind of limitations to prevent you from shooting somewhere on location in the dark, in a field, because I do a lot of field recording, so I really would appreciate having this. At the same time, 99.9% of recordings are happening during daytime, so it maybe rather have a cleaner image in a lower ISOs. But anyway, the world is moving towards high sensitivity, clean image like cameras like Sony's and even Panasonic's, and even Canons, I would say by now they're half decent. So Blackmagic is lacking in that area too. Number 16 is you don't have 16:9 recording. You have the 3:2 and 17:9, but the 17:9 is actually just a further crop from the 3:2. There is no 16:9 48 FPS or 60 FPS recording, which is kind of sucky, because I actually could use with that aspect ratio for my YouTube recordings and commercial stuff. So it is a shame that it's not included, and maybe the future software could bring it back for us people who use 16:9, you know, like 99% of monitors and stuff that's out there. Number 17 is another ergonomic gripe, if you will. All of the I/O stuff is crammed into one location, and if you plug in a couple of connections in, it's already cumbersome to access others. Like, my fingers are not fat, and I have issues disconnecting that power cable if I have my USB-C, HDMI, and something else plugged in. If anything, it just feels like another cost-cutting measure, because it feels like the camera is pretty much a PCB with a bunch of I/O at the back, and they didn't even bother having any routing to spread out the connections elsewhere. Number 18 is poor battery life. Yes, it still is fairly poor. I am recording this plugged in into the main supply, because I would have changed probably 3 batteries by now, because the battery lasts 40-50 minutes maximum. It depends on the brightness of your LCD that you are using. I found out about 35% LCD lasts you about 50 minutes, for me anyway. Major improvement compared to previous cameras, but the previous cameras were so unacceptable performance that I don't give this as a positive. It still for me is a negative, because a little Sony ZF-100 or whatever they call them batteries last 2 hours. I understand it's not raw, but yeah, still, it should be addressed at some point. The camera is really not that efficient. And number 19, again, one of the most biggest bad points for me personally, and the last point in my list, is that it cannot record 120 frames per second 4K. And not only it cannot do that in 4K, it actually doesn't even do any kind of oversampled option or full frame option of that frame rate. It sucks. I cannot address this strongly enough that, you know, even like a tiny Sony ZV-E1 camera can do 120 FPS with the tiniest crop and still, you know, you produce a usable image. I don't know what Blackmagic were thinking. Again, I would really pay extra for that to be able to have that functionality, or even at least give us 2K like it used to be on the 6K cameras. Now we have a 1080p, and it's cropped so much that I couldn't believe it how much it was cropped. I thought maybe I pressed the zoom in function on my screen, the peaking, you know, that maybe it's, no, actually that's how it is. It's a decent image at 120 FPS, 1080p, but 1080p, let's face it, nowadays is a little bit not enough. And now I'm gonna try to answer the question, who is this camera for and who is it not for? Who is it for? People like myself, people who are potentially insane and need that amount of color fidelity with their workflow. Maybe an aspiring cinematographer who needs motivation to feel like they're using a cinema camera, because the reality of things is that most of the mirrorless cameras at the moment in the market for even half the price of this camera can produce just as good of an image. If you mess up the raw kind quality recording in terms of your exposure, if you overexpose it so much, or if you underexpose it so significantly more, you are going to be just as screwed as you would be in 10-bit. And anything that can record 10-bit has more than enough color fidelity and data to achieve that look. So, like I said, who is it for? An enthusiast, really. Is for somebody who either is an enthusiast or, like myself, I really love working with color and I need the maximum that I can get. Could I get by with something else? Absolutely. But you only live once, and if I wanted to get something even better than that, I would probably need to jump into the red territory or into the Ursa 12K Pro range. But again, this is more, this camera is for people who need the mobility as well. So you need the color fidelity and you need the mobility. This is really the only option, because you don't need the external screens to be able to record it. It's there built in, and that's why the you know, cumbersome body feel like. I can live with that, but I'm knowing that I don't need an additional screen and additional weight. And you get the internal raw recording. Also, yes, if you need the flexibility with color in post, technically it is better. But if you pick up a hybrid that can shoot raw externally, that flexibility kind of goes out the window. Again, it's more for niche, for people who need the mobility. I really could not emphasize this enough. If you need the package, all-in package that has maximum redundancy in terms of color, a little bit in exposure, and big screen built in, so you know where you're focusing exactly, very precisely, yeah, this is for you then. But if you are literally anybody else that doesn't need the mobility and the resilience and the ever so slightly more color fidelity, this is definitely not a camera for you. I wouldn't waste your money on it. If you want to get similar approach, but you don't mind not having the full frame, the 6K Pro with internal NDs, I think it's actually becoming a tempting option, because I've seen some selling for about 1.2 grand. It seems like a good option. And for anybody else who are wanting to get into cinematography, wanting to shoot great image, good image, whatever, there is 1,000,001 options. Just from the top of my head, the ones that are kind of in a similar price range would be the Panasonic S5 IIX, because the S5 II is already on a massive rebate, it's much cheaper, almost £1,000 or dollars cheaper than the Blackmagic. The Sony A7S III, that can be had for nearly identical price now if you know where to look for. The Sony A7 IV is even, again, a lot cheaper. And Sony ZV-E1, which is an absolute bargain of the cameras. For me, probably it's one of the best value cameras that you can get currently on the market. And maybe a Canon R5, because again, it reaches the level of pricing similar to A7S III or even below that. And that's just the cameras that are in a similar price range, or some of them are significantly lower, but even at 1.5K, there is so much competition. If you are really don't have anything to shoot with, oh, you're really spoiled for choice. But I would just say, if you are already with a original S5 or A7 III or A7 IV, maybe even in considering this, or you're owning a Blackmagic 6K, I'd say really don't waste your money. Don't buy this camera. Don't be tempted by all these bullshit reviewers that been sent their cameras in, or there are a lot of tech reviewers that really are afraid to upset the brand or upset any potential future brands and not speak out, you know, negatively about the products. I don't give a shit. I tell you how it is. This camera is great, but there are a lot better options and out there, economically speaking, that you could be potentially using. So don't be confused by other reviews that this is some kind of magical camera that can produce amazing images. No, it will be producing just as good of an image as if I would pick up any other camera, in my hands anyway, because I know a little bit of what I'm doing. And if you spend more time learning the craft and training your eye, and even stupid thing like watching more movies, more classic Hollywood high quality shot, graded, edited movies, that would benefit you more than buying this camera, I guarantee you. So really don't feel pressure to buy this, because there's no point spending money on shit that you don't need. And to summarize, I'm still keeping the camera because I am, like I mentioned before, I am a bit insane in here. There's few cells that are not really making the connection, so I need the maximum color fidelity, and I need the camera that I would be able to take with me to locations. I travel a lot, so I need to record a lot with maximum flexibility in post. But at the same time, I'm not afraid to be critical, because I'm not here to justify my purchase. I don't give a shit. Like I said, I have other cameras that I could use anytime I want. I'm just doing this review for anybody else potentially considering, and hopefully maybe somewhere down the line Blackmagic could see and could realize that they're really on the back foot. They really need to start innovating and producing more premium and more feature-rich cameras. The days of just getting away with using bare bone components slapped together and pretending this is a new camera is over. The people are voting with their money, and people with honest opinions and who actually did extensively test this camera like myself know that, well, you kind of feel a little bit conned because, yeah, you get full frame and open gate and anamorphic support, like 1.6 stretch anamorphic is really nice to have, and internal raw and whatever, but most of the stuff was already present in the previous cameras and even including the body designs. So yeah, it feels like Blackmagic kind of lost touch with their customer base. I hope they will change because they are still currently my favorite color producing camera that I can afford anyway. But I really hope in the future they will start making changes internally and start listening to what the people want and just give them that. I just don't understand why they don't do it. But it is what it is. We are where we are, and that pretty much summarized my entire review. Actually, my Apple Watch is telling me to stand up because I've been sitting here for hours doing this shit. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope you got some sort of clarity of what this camera is and what it isn't. If you're a fanboy and you're offended, please do let me know in the comments why you're offended and let's fight. Anyhow, I've been dragging this way too long. I will see you in the next one. I hope you're all staying well and good and all that, and catch you later. Bye.